Let's walk through the types of treatments that are used today to treat CLL.
The non-watch and wait